What do you think of the Conservative opposition to the online harms bill, saying they want more criminalization, less regulation?
I'm glad the Conservative Party is taking the time to read the bill and are reflecting on it, first point. Secondly, I would say that critically this is about protecting Canadian children and it's about empowering adults. What I would also say is that it is possible to walk and chew gum at the same time. And what I mean by that is that there are very specific aspects of this legislation that will improve law enforcement and the criminal code and what's called the Mandatory Reporting Act about how the preservation requirements for this kind of material and the ability to actually prosecute it. But what I've heard resoundingly from law enforcement itself is that they need more responsibility from online platforms. This stuff spreads virally very, very quickly, and when it stays online and it stays in the internet, even if you were successfully able to prosecute the offender, the victimization of that individual child or that woman remains for years thereafter. And lastly, what I would say is, what I've heard constantly from the victims, is that it's really hard to go through a criminal process that takes time. What they want is takedown. They want the material off of the internet. And lastly, some of these perpetrators are in Eastern Europe or 3 oceans away. The notion that we're going to be able to successfully prosecute people like that quickly is far. The notion of being able to take down the information is immediate. That's what we need to work on.
Mr. McKinnon, pharmacare bill tomorrow?
Well, we'll see. We're hopeful.
Well, it's on the notice
That's
paper,
the deadline.
So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What can Canadians expect?
Well, Canadians can expect to see that we are taking the very positive first step towards a national pharmacare program, and I know the Minister of Health will want to talk to you more about that.
Tomorrow? À quel point vous êtes inquiet de voir que le Québec et l'Alberta ne sont pas d'accord pour un programme comme ça? Ils veulent un programme de fait.
Ils n'ont même pas vu encore le libellé du projet de loi, donc le ministre de la Santé, je suis sûr, va avoir des discussions fructueuses avec toutes les provinces.
Est-ce qu'il est temps d'encadrer le recours à la clause dérogatoire? De plus en plus de provinces y ont recours, notamment le Québec. Est-ce que le temps est venu d'encadrer ça, selon vous?
Il est clair que nous avons toujours été clairs par rapport à l'usage de la clause nonobstant et ça brime les droits des personnes. Donc la Charte des droits et libertés est suspendue. Je pense qu'on doit aborder ça avec une grande prudence, peut-être plus de prudence qui a été démontrée à date.
How quickly can you get this through Parliament? How confident are you can get it through quickly? Because there are a lot of Canadians looking on pharmacare, yeah.
Yeah, well, I look forward to a vigorous and healthy debate in the House, and we'll see how it goes. I know that we'll be standing up for national pharmacare.
Sur une motion conservatrice pour qu'il y ait un rapport déposé ici au 18 mars donnant le coût complet d'ArriveCan. Comment allez-vous voter et pourquoi?
Nous, c'est rare qu'on annonce nos intentions avant le temps et donc.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de la motion?
Les conservateurs sont très cyniques par rapport à tout ça. Ils exigent des documents qui n'existent pas. Donc, on verra.
Monsieur McKinnon, il y a un sondage qui donne 8 points d'avance. Voulez-vous traduire avant?
Oh.
We just get that in English.
Yeah, the Conservatives are asking for information that does not currently exist in the form that they've asked it in. So, that's they're playing a very cynical political game.
Il y a un sondage qui donne 8 points d'avance aux conservateurs au Québec par rapport à votre formation. Ça vous inquiète? Ça vous inspire pas comme commentaire?
Moi, je regarde pas les sondages. Moi, je regarde le travail que j'ai à faire aujourd'hui et on est très déterminés à produire des résultats pour les Canadiens à tous les jours.
Ça doit vous inquiéter un peu.
With pharmacare settled, with the supply and confidence agreement, most of those things have been checked off. Do you expect this Parliament to work better over the next year?
Well, look, you've heard me say many times, obstruction without alternative is not the way this place is supposed to work. So you saw we presented a motion on Monday to help overcome that, to provide more hours of debate on bills. We're giving the Conservatives more opportunities, so we're going to continue to work productively.
Prime Minister, what do you think of the Conservative opposition to the online harms bill, saying more criminalization, less regulation? Anything?
Good morning, Minister. based on what we're learning about ArriveCan, how concerned are you about where Canada's Indigenous procurement policy is going and whether or not it's actually serving Indigenous communities?
Well, I think, look, this is a conversation that we've been having for at least a year or longer with Indigenous communities. Obviously, Indigenous business is very excited about Canada's procurement strategy, which is essentially saying all departments need to procure 5% of their procurement. We have a 5% procurement target so that Indigenous peoples have an opportunity to grow their businesses as a result of Government of Canada spending. The challenge is always identifying who's Indigenous. And of course, we have criteria around Indigenous-owned, majority Indigenous-owned businesses, etc. But Indigenous people have, for a long time, talked about the need to be sure that the people that are defining themselves as Indigenous are. And so we do that work with partners, NACA, for example, and other national business organizations, Indigenous business organizations. And we are looking at a way that, and we have been for a while, a way that we could either share or transfer that responsibility or opportunities, I might say, to Indigenous partners to manage a list like that for the Government of Canada.
But how concerned are you in this case that a company that, appears to not be very Indigenous got this
I'm laughing at the nature of your question. Very Indigenous, sort of Indigenous, not that Indigenous. These are the questions that Indigenous people are asking, and who defines who's Indigenous? There are some ways that the Government of Canada, of course, in our colonial system defines indigeneity, but Indigenous people are saying that they should have the right for themselves to define who's Indigenous, and so we're working through those questions right now.
And do you feel like there was a failure here?
I can't speak to that until the investigation's concluded. Thank you.
Details you can share about the spending review and the reductions that are going to be shown?
The refocusing of spending towards our government's priorities will be detailed in the main estimates, which I will be tabling in the House of Commons on Thursday morning. And all of the details will be there.
Can the government's fiscal framework afford the increase in spending that NATO is demanding?
The fiscal frame at the current time will be detailed and build on what we've seen in the fall economic statement, and it will be contained in the budget.
That's a no?
Our defense spending has been increasing, as you know, by 70% under Strong Secure Engaged, by $40 million with NORAD modernization, and we will keep spending on defense at the same time as delivering for Canadians in areas of affordable housing.
But when you were defense minister, you were pushing for a much steeper increase because Canada is a laggard in NATO spending, and then you were shifted out of the portfolio, and now you're responsible for the fiscal frame in a sense. Can you square the circle? You're seeing both sides of it. It seems like Canada can't afford it, but what do you say then to allies?
One of the great things about being at Treasury Board is that you're right, you see the entire system and you see it from an expenditure standpoint. And at the same time, we have to ensure that we are maintaining our commitments to Canadians, especially in times of higher than normal inflation and interest rates in the area of affordable housing and reconciliation in areas where there is need for Canadians. But that doesn't mean that we won't continue to contribute to our multilateral alliances like NATO, like NORAD, and continue to ensure that our troops have what they need. And I will say that in the supplementary estimates votes in November, the Conservatives voted against supports for the Canadian Armed Forces numerous times. And that wasn't only with regards to Ukraine, but direct supports to the Canadian Armed Forces.
But the government has NDP support in the House to get more spending. You don't need the Conservatives.
All of our spending decisions will be detailed in the Finance Minister's budget, which she will table this session, and at the same time, I will continue to detail
on ArriveCan
information. On
ArriveCan, what you were the procurement minister at the time. How did you miss it?
Has Canada actually?
That depends on the UN is doing its work. We have to wait for that.
Has Canada actually missed a payment to UNRWA at this point? Were we supposed to send money that we have not sent?
No, not yet.
Have they given you a timeline? Have they indicated?
They have said that they will that the investigation is proceeding as they expected, and we should have something soon, but I can't give you the timeline because that's not in my hands.
When is that payment supposed to
is
happen?
supposed to happen in April. So are you confident this investigation is going to be enough?
Well, we've
completed
paused funding for any
investigate?
additional funding pending the investigation. The ball is in their court.
But it is
but we are working with them to make sure that A, the investigation is concluded, but also that there is a transparent, comprehensive investigation. While we do that, we provided $40 million additional to the other organizations, and I just came back from the region, and Canadian aid is making a difference, and we're even exploring other options, including airdrops.
What other options have you asked?
Airdrops of aid into Gaza in partnership with like-minded countries like Jordan.
Everybody's asking, are you confident that it will be done by the date in April?
You're asking me to prejudge an investigation. I have confidence in the UN body that's looking into this, and we'll see what they come back with. But we've always insisted that we should have a transparent, comprehensive investigation before we act.
Did that 40 million come?
Have you asked to see the evidence that led them into this?
Yes,
and
we
have you
Did
seen
that 40 million come from UNRWA's funding?
Vous allez bien? Ça va très bien. Ce que vous êtes en train de faire, c'est fausse route. Il y a plein d'experts qui disent qu'ils vont bannir les choses.
Plein?
Oui.
Ben,
il y en avait moins 900 qui ont signé une lettre.
Oui, ben, il y en avait plusieurs centaines aussi quand on s'est rencontrés. Et je dirais, d'abord, le but, c'est de faire la vie dure aux criminels. Hein? Je pense qu'on peut s'entendre. Hein? Je pense que l'ensemble des Canadiens diraient avec le problème du vol d'auto, c'est un problème qu'on doit affronter de front, hein? Et de faire la vie dure aux criminels. C'est sûr que de bannir les équipements de piratage, c'est un des outils dans le coffre à outils. Vous savez, quand on a réuni...
Même les policiers disent que ça ne servira à rien. Là.
Ben, écoutez, ça, il y avait quand même pas mal de policiers quand on a fait le sommet. Je peux vous dire, j'étais là, moi. Forcé de constater que vous avez consulté des gens qui n'étaient pas au sommet. Mais ceux qui étaient au sommet, je peux vous dire, j'ai pas entendu ce son de cloche-là. Au contraire, les gens disaient, écoutez, vous prenez un des outils dans le coffre à outils, vous le mettez en action, tant mieux. Parce que tout le monde comprend que... Vous savez, quand vous faites le combat au crime ou au crime organisé, c'est pas comme... Il n'y a rien d'instantané. Il faut prendre plusieurs mesures. C'est pour ça que, par exemple, on regarde ce qui peut se faire au port de Montréal. J'ai même parlé au port de destination. Il y a plusieurs mesures que le ministre Leblanc regarde, mais ce qui est sûr, c'est que notre message, notre but, c'est de faire la vie difficile aux criminels. Et dans le cas
les gens qui font aussi la vie difficile aux criminels, c'est les experts en sécurité. Puis eux, ils disent, on utilise ce dispositif-là pour trouver les failles.
Mais tant mieux.
Si on n'est pas capable d'utiliser, si vous nous...
je vous dirais tant mieux.
Ma question.
Non, allez-y.
Si vous bannissez ces instruments-là, on ne pourra plus trouver les failles. Vous allez bannir des instruments qui servent à faire de la sécurité.
Vous savez, on a une belle solution pour ça. On va leur donner une licence. Alors, ceux qui ont une opération légitime, c'est clair. On se comprend, M. Noël, on quand même des gens raisonnables. S'il y a des gens qui en font un usage légitime pour nous aider à combattre le crime, c'est clair qu'on va leur donner une licence d'opération. Alors, tout le monde comprend ça dans le milieu. C'est pour ça que je vous dis, ceux qui étaient au sommet ont compris ça. Les gens disaient, parce qu'il y avait les fabricants, il y avait les compagnies d'assurance, il y avait les corps de police, il y avait les gens du renseignement, il y avait les exportateurs, il y avait les manufacturiers, l'écosystème au complet était là. Les gens disent, ce qu'on veut pas, c'est que ça se retrouve dans les mains des criminels, mais ceux qui en ont une utilisation légitime vont pouvoir les utiliser. Alors moi, je veux dire, écoutez, quand on fait face au crime organisé dans une situation comme celle-là, il faut regarder tous les outils qu'on a à notre disposition et bannir des dispositifs de piratage, c'en est un. Est-ce que c'est le seul? Non. C'est pour ça qu'on regarde à l'ensemble. Puis moi, je suis très ouvert à écouter les gens, mais le message est clair, c'est qu'on veut faire la vie dure aux criminels.
M. Champagne, il y a un sondage ce matin qui donne 8 points d'avance aux conservateurs sur votre parti au Québec. Ça vous inspire quoi comme commentaire? Est-ce que vous êtes en train de perdre le Québec?
Ben, je dirais, il faut continuer de travailler fort. Moi, tu sais, il y a peu de gens qui me parlent des sondages dans la rue, mais les gens me parlent de questions d'enjeux de logement, de l'abordabilité de l'épicerie, du virage vert qu'on est en train de prendre dans l'industrie. Les gens me disent, écoutez, continuez.
Mais est-ce que c'est pas un signe comme quoi ils sont en train de faire confiance?
Il y a un signe, je vous dirais, puis je pense, puis, tu sais, je regarde ça, si on regarde la forêt plutôt claire, si vous regardez dans les pays de l'Occident, c'est clair que quand c'est plus difficile pour les gens, on le voit en Europe, on le voit aux États-Unis, on le voit dans différents pays. Il y a comme une réaction normale. Quand il y a de l'anxiété, bien, ça se reflète sur les élus. Les gens sont inquiets à différents niveaux et ça se reflète je pense, face aux élus. Alors, c'est sûr qu'il faut tenir compte de ça, mais je pense que la meilleure façon d'agir, c'est de garder le cap, parce que la dernière chose que les gens veulent, c'est qu'on se focalise sur des enjeux politiques. C'est plutôt dire qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour aider les gens, comment on peut améliorer la situation, la question de la qualité de vie, du coût de la vie, c'est ça qui préoccupe les gens. Puis le message que j'entends derrière ça, c'est un cri du cœur des gens qui disent « Continuez d'être là pour nous, on en a besoin ». Et on va continuer de le faire parce que c'est pas
Minister Freeland teased a new plan to lower costs for Canadians that was coming this week. Can you give us any insights on what that's going to be? Sorry, Minister Freeland yesterday said that there was going to be a new plan coming out that's going to lower costs for Canadians. Can you give us any sense about what that's going to be? Are we going to see another grocery rebate, anything that's going to help lower the cost of groceries, or is it something totally unmoving?
Well, one thing you can get insight, obviously I cannot speak about what may or may not be in the budget, but what I can tell you is that one thing that we have been clearly saying to Canadians is that we want to double down on competition. We know that the reform on competition is probably one of the landmark achievement of this government for Canadians, because we know that, you know, more choices, more innovation, better prices in not only one sector but different sector of the economy. I think this is going to have a very long-lasting impact on the Canadian economy. We know that there's a lot of concentration in different industries, and I think it's about time as a mature economy that, you know, we have more competition. I think that really is going to put the pressure on price that Canadians want to see in different sector of the industry. So this is certainly going to be something important.
That's not going to happen immediately. That's not going to help people afford groceries.
Well, I would say if you look at the grocery and the push that we've been doing on them, you could already see the trend. The inflation that you've seen in food prices is trending in the right direction. Am I satisfied? No. Do we need to do more? Definitely. Is it worth the fight? Yes. Is it easy? No. I think Canadians understand that. It's not like a switch you flip and suddenly you have better prices when it comes to grocery. But I think what we've done is we shook the tree. And I think competition is at the forefront of the minds now of industry. And I think it's a good thing for the country. Merci tout le monde. À tantôt. Merci à vous autres. Merci, madame.
Au sujet de la loi 21, gros jugement qui s'en vient demain. Selon vous, est-ce que le moment est venu d'encadrer le recours à la clause non-obstant, la clause dérogatoire?
Bien, on attend effectivement le jugement demain. Il faut être patient pour voir quel sera ce jugement.
Mais la clause dérogatoire, est-ce que ça doit être encadré, selon vous, ce recours de plus en plus fréquent par les provinces?
On va commencer par entendre le jugement de demain. On verra quelles seront les conclusions du juge et on fera le point sur la suite.
Est-ce qu'il y a un nouveau sondage ce matin qui donne 8 points d'avance aux conservateurs au Québec sur votre parti? Est-ce que vous êtes en train d'échapper le Québec, les libéraux?
Bien, je pense que les gens ont raison d'être inquiets de ce qui se passe sur la planète et pour l'humanité. Un jour, on n'est pas évidemment là, mais un jour, comme citoyen, on aura l'obligation de se prononcer sur quel genre de politique on veut faire au Canada et au Québec. Est-ce que c'est la politique de l'intimidation, de l'injure et de l'insulte, comme celle de M. Poilievre, ou si c'est un gouvernement qui travaille pour la classe moyenne, pour les citoyens, réduire la pollution et tenir compte des enjeux des Québécois.
Ça vous inquiète? Ça vous inquiète la situation?
Non, on n'est pas là. On a beaucoup de travail à faire, mais quand le moment sera venu, moi j'ai hâte de discuter avec les gens de ma circonscription sur si on veut la politique négative, d'insultes, comme celle de M. Poilievre, ou si on veut faire des choses différentes. Merci.
I think they're mostly compatible, but I think S210 was basically what it says is that the government will create a facility for identification, make sure you're right team. I think they're quite reconcilable.
But do you think that they both still have to happen? Like, because the online harms bill does not create such a sort of online ID type idea.
No, I think the online harms bill will proceed on its own basis and probably has some good ideas in it, which will be probably refined in committee. S210, I think, will be also refined in committee, but bear in mind, it's already gone through the Senate. They've already gone through this whole exercise, and there's about 20-odd countries that already do this. So if they can comply with their privacy legislation, I don't see why S210 couldn't be.
So you do think, but you would support both or continue to support both?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Okay, thanks.
Je suis très intéressé de voir le jugement de Cour d'appel. On a attendu longtemps pour ça.
Et encore, la chose qui m'intéresse le plus, c'est l'utilisation préventive de la clause dérogatoire. Et j'espère ou la Cour d'appel ou probablement la Cour suprême va juger que c'est pas possible.
Votre ancien collègue David Lametti était pour l'encadrement dans son speech de départ. Là. Il a fait un discours puis il a dit justement qu'il faut que ça cesse l'utilisation.
Oui, tout à fait.
Est-ce que vous êtes d'accord?
Tout à fait. Je crois que c'est inconstitutionnel dès le début. Je crois que la Cour suprême va pencher là-dessus et j'espère qu'ils vont juger que c'est pas possible d'utiliser la clause de manière préventive.
Un amendement.
Mais non. Non, la position actuelle devant la Cour, c'est qu'on complète que tu ne peux pas l'utiliser comme ça parce que c'était pas la manière que c'était prévu par les gens qui ont écrit la clause.
Mais si la voix des tribunaux ne va pas à votre satisfaction.
Exact, mais ça, c'est une différente question. Premièrement, c'est devant les tribunaux maintenant. Bonne journée.
Merci.
Hi, Minister Anand. Just wanted to ask you to repeat in English what we talked about in French this morning on ArriveCan.
What's the question?
Well, you were the minister in that portfolio when those contracts were first awarded. So, did you know about any of this? Are you concerned about that any of this happened while you were in that role?
The issues rested with officials and did not come to me as minister. At that time, you'll recall that I was highly focused on PPE, rapid test and vaccine procurements. And so any issues relating to the one you raised in your question rested with officials at that department if they came, but it did not cross my desk.
But should there have been more ministerial oversight of this contract?
I will say that the Auditor General has provided a fulsome and comprehensive report with recommendations that we intend to follow, and I am highly concerned with her findings, and they do highlight that there was a lack of following of existing rules. From a Treasury Board perspective, now that I am in the position as President of the Treasury Board, I too am looking to see what measures that can be taken from an oversight standpoint. For example, sanctions, for example, audits, those are within the purview of the Treasury Board President, and I am looking very closely at those options. I have met with my officials on a number of occasions now to ensure that I have a full understanding of what might be possible.
Do you have any take on the Conservative motion this afternoon calling for the government to produce all of these documents?
I am continuing to ensure that as a minister within a government that cares deeply about delivering for Canadians while being accountable and responsible, that I do whatever is necessary and what is possible within my purview.
Should the government produce those documents?